Today at the National Press Club, co-chair of the Minderoo Foundation Nicola Forrest and CEO of Thrive by 5 Jay Weatherill, discussing early childhood and how better education in the early years will drive social and economic success. That's today's National Press Club address.
Hello and welcome to the National Press Club of Australia and today's Westpac address. I'm Jane Norman, a director here at the club and also a political reporter with the ABC. Well, today's guests are Minderoo Foundation co-founder Nicola Forrest and Thrive by 5 Chief Executive and former South Australian Premier Jay Weatherill. Together they are putting childcare policy in the spotlight, campaigning for universal access to a high-quality, affordable early learning system. If you're following us online, you can find us on Twitter. Our user handle is @PressClubAust and our hashtag is NPC. Everyone, please welcome Nicola Forrest and Jay Weatherill. And Nicola, I think you're beginning today's proceedings.
Thank you very much, Jane, and good afternoon, everybody. It is my privilege to be here with you today. I want to talk to you today about what I believe is the greatest travesty facing our nation, and also the greatest opportunity: the healthy and happy development of our children. But first, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, the Ngunnawal people, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. This isn't the first time I have stood up in front of a group of people and asked the Australian government to reform its policies on early childhood. I've done it many times. I've been doing it for 20 years. 20 years to be precise, because that's how long ago my husband and I set up the Australian Children's Trust, which is now the Minderoo Foundation. I haven't been alone. I've been part of a growing chorus of public organisations, concerned mums and dads, and scientists. But it's hard not to feel utterly frustrated at the lack of progress and wonder why our politicians haven't listened. Perhaps I've been dismissed because I'm not to be taken seriously. A woman talking about children, of course she cares. Perhaps you just think this is a pet hobby for me, something I do to make myself feel useful. Or maybe you just don't even think there is a problem. Why shouldn't mum stay at home and look after bub for a few years? So what if 1 in 5 Australian kids turns up to their first day of school developmentally delayed? At least the majority are doing fine. Well, I am here to say there is a problem and it's in all our interests to fix it. Yes, I may be a mother of 3 to Sydney, Sophia and Grace, and a co-mother to a 4th, Violet. And yes, I am motivated by the experiences I've had, both raising and losing children. But my dedication to ensuring that every single child born in Australia gets the best start in life is far more than just a personal quest. It's one based on overwhelming scientific evidence. Every minute, 250 children are born across the world. Girls and boys who will grow up to be the women and men who will run our hospitals, our schools, our courts. Here in Australia, 1 child is born every minute and 43 seconds. Our future welfare, prosperity and success as a nation depends on our newborns and ensuring that every single one of them grows up to be kind, capable, productive and resilient. As the great philosopher Jerry Seinfeld said, make no mistake why these children are here. They are here to replace us. The science clearly shows that we have to get it right in the first 5 years. 5 years to ensure that every child has the foundation to develop to the best of his or her potential. You blink and those 5 years are over. A fleeting window of time that science says is pivotal to the emotional, cognitive and social development of your child. But we aren't getting it right. We aren't even close. All children come into this world with so much enthusiasm for life, so much hope, joy and resilience, so much potential. But not all of them go on to lead successful, happy, productive lives. Why? Because we fail so many of them in their earliest years. Currently, more than 20% of our kids have health or developmental vulnerabilities when they start school. For example, they may not be able to concentrate, follow instructions, express themselves or interact with other children or adults, or they may be unusually withdrawn and anxious. According to a national study published last year, children who start school with these developmental delays are a whole 9 months behind their peers by the time they reach year 3, and that's in reading and numeracy. And ultimately, they have fewer employment opportunities down the line. The tragedy is that many of these problems are avoidable. They have arisen because we as a nation are not creating stimulating environments that all under fives need to flourish. Since we founded the Minderoo Foundation, almost 6 million children have been born in Australia. That's 1.2 million children who have failed to reach their full developmental potential due to the inadequacy of our current government policies. In fact, over the last 2 decades, levels of literacy and numeracy amongst Australian children have not risen, they have declined. And to make matters worse, the steepest declines are in our poorest communities. We are becoming more unequal, not less. It's a disgrace that UNICEF ranks Australia's education system among the most unequal of all developed countries. Now, add to the mix that Australia's expenditure on early childhood education, as a percentage of our GDP, is one of the lowest among OECD countries. But I want to make it clear, it's not just the kids we are failing, it's also their parents. Right now, child support services are a bureaucratic nightmare, inefficient, hideously complex, and inaccessible to those that need them most. Let me give you an example. Maybe your kid is in a state-run early learning centre, but you get a childcare subsidy from the federal government and support from an NGO funded by both the state and the federal government. Good luck navigating that one, particularly if you're a single mum working full-time. In short, the system isn't broken, it simply does not exist. So, what's the solution? We need an early childhood system that makes life easier for parents, not harder. A system that is accessible, affordable, and high quality. Not one or the other. We need a trusted early learning centre in every community that fulfills any and every need a parent and their young child might have. A place that allows kids to experience interactions, stimulations, and activities that science says are crucial for development. A place that allows every child in the community to have a safe space in which to play. An activity so crucial to development that it is enshrined in the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child. Imagine that. And lastly, these centres will be there for the parents. They will be a one-stop shop for all childcare services, and they will provide parents with all the information they need to support their kids' development, right from the moment the child is conceived. Not just the easy stuff like, how do I get my kid to eat broccoli, but the harder stuff like, why is my child not making eye contact with me? Why am I having trouble getting them to communicate? In my view, these high-quality early learning centres should be a basic human right. For every single Australian kid, no matter their postcode, and regardless of whether both or neither parent works. It's about uniformity, consistency, and equality of access. I've seen the power of such an approach on a visit to Chalice, a primary school just outside of Perth. And a few years ago I was there, and a young mother was sitting with me and explaining to me that her 6-year-old child was teaching her how to read. Now, some might see the injustice in this situation, a cruel turning of the tables, the child teaching the parent. I actually found it quite inspiring. It showed me how quickly we can break the intergenerational cycle of disadvantage when we get our policies and our approach right. All we want for parents is to have options. The option to access information, the option to lean on a community, the option to be fast-tracked through medical and child development services rather than waiting years or falling through the cracks. What we are talking about here is an ecosystem where support can be found when and where it's needed. And before you say, I don't need help, not from government, not from scientists, not from anyone. My parents did it this way and I'm pretty fine. I want to share with you how much I have leaned on the support of specialists and scientists as a parent. And I just need to, excuse me. Our third daughter, Matilda, arrived full term, stillborn. It tore us apart, as many other parents who have been through this will understand. But because of this experience, I reached out to Professor John Newnham, Senior Australian of the Year last year, who has set up their Women's and Infants Research Foundation. I joined their board and worked with them for years. This relationship and the research that I became immersed in is the reason I am standing here today, and indeed why we launched the Minderoo Foundation 20 years ago. It opened my eyes to the astonishingly simple fact that from conception, the first 5 years of life are crucial to human health and happiness. Protect those years and you protect the future. And it also helped me come to terms with the loss of our daughter by giving me an understanding of what we can't control and tragically what we can't control. Every parent struggles from time to time. We often feel lost or overwhelmed by expectations and information, or nagged, more likely, by self-doubt and guilt. That's why we need support, a system that backs us up, buffers our kids from the ups and downs, and catapults them towards success. So, how do we create this system? This year, myself and Minderoo Foundation's Thrive by 5 launched our final campaign. It's the final one because we will not stop until we achieve our goal. A high-quality early learning system for all. This doesn't just make sense for our kids, for our parents and for our society. It also makes financial sense. In 2019, Minderoo Foundation published a major report showing that Australians foot a late intervention bill of over $15 billion per annum. That's over $15 billion that is being spent tackling problems that could have been prevented had we simply invested earlier and more wisely. The cost of our inaction is stained on the government's budget papers. $5.9 billion for child protection, $2.7 billion for youth crime, $1.3 billion for mental health. And remember, this report was before COVID. But our failure to set our kids up for success has far more than economic cost. Suicide is the leading cause of death in our young people. Children as young as 10, 11 and 12. 1/3 of Indigenous children who die take their own lives. How on earth can politicians in this country pretend there is no problem here? How can we sit by and think we're doing all right when some of our children clearly lack that most basic of human rights, hope? This is not a problem that this is a problem that we, not our children, have created. Today is our line in the sand moment. We need major economic and political reform. We did it with Medicare, we did it with GST, and we did it with the NDIS. Policy must keep up with science. with what society wants and needs. Otherwise, there will be no society left to govern. Sure, it will require some upfront investment to set up such a system, and a fresh look at how we use our current funding. Of course, some of you listening may be thinking, hey, I chose not to have children, or having children is a personal choice, so why are my taxes being used like this? But let's not forget that this is the way our society works. We don't all smoke, or drink, or get cancer, or have disabilities. But we live in an advanced society where we care for everyone equally, or at least we aspire to. Of course, there are countless different ways to raise a child, and to raise a child well. But if we can at all least agree that our policies are out of date, that they do not serve the public interest, that change is critical, we will make more progress this year alone than in the past 20. Many of you will have read Peter Pan when you were a kid, the story of the boy who never grows up, whose childhood never ends. Sometimes watching toddlers at play, busily creating magnificent works of art, or as was the highlight of my day yesterday, visiting the Good Start Centre and playing with mud pies in the garden, you think they will never grow up. But our children do grow up. Every morning they wake up a day older. And I can assure you, every one of those days counts. We have 1,825 days, 5 years, to set our kids up for success. Time is running out. The government can't guarantee health and happiness for all, but at the very least, it can maximise the chance that every Australian child grows up to be a healthy, happy adult. Australia has the potential to create a system in which every family has access to the best parenting advice and the best early learning centres, staffed by friendly, highly trained specialists who you know and trust. A system that is available all the way from pregnancy through to your child's first day at school. That is what a future world-class early childhood learning system could look like. And it should be that. But we must act now. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you for that speech. And Jay Weatherill, please take to the podium.
The most significant economic and social reform of our generation is within our grasp. The greatest social reform since Medicare, the most important economic reform since the opening up of our financial system. Early years reform will define the post-COVID era. It's not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. The benefits of reform are entirely predictable. A high yield, low risk investment. The cost of inaction too are also entirely predictable. They're incredibly expensive. The current system is bad for children, it's bad for families, and it's bad for the economy. Right when our families need our help the most, we make it harder for them. We talk a lot about family in this nation. Our political discourse is rich with talk of family values, working families, many of which we're told are trying to make ends meet. But this is inconsistent with our behaviours. We shouldn't talk about family values if we insist on policy settings which don't value families. And there are plenty of examples of this hypocrisy, and we've seen in our current approach to the early years. Our policy settings increase pressure on families. CPI data released in late January reveals that out-of-pocket expenses are increasing across Australia in childcare area at 2.4% higher than they were last year. This is twice the rate of inflation for other goods and services. Almost half of the total increase in the CPI in the past quarter came from increased childcare costs. These significant additional costs after government subsidies over the last decade have been rising faster than electricity bills, faster than housing costs, adding to cost of living pressures. And the government's own modelling demonstrates that these costs will grow by around 4% per annum over each of the next 3 years. A few weeks ago, a federal minister tried to put these increases in context. After subsidies, the out-of-pocket expenses, he said, for childcare were about $5 per hour. Doesn't sound like much, does it? Unless, of course, you're a second income earner needing to work 20 hours a week to make the family budget work. That family is $100 a week out of pocket, and that's just for one child. For 2 children, $200 out of pocket. How many Australian families think that $200 weekly impost is insignificant? Also, out-of-pocket expenses for preschool are rising. The current system is unaffordable and inconvenient for many families, which is why preschool enrolment has fallen for the 3rd consecutive year, from 92.4% in 2016 to 87.7% in 2019. So the family may be core to our political conversation, but we continue to support policies which effectively place Australian families under more pressure than in comparable countries. The accumulated burdens on families can contribute to toxic stress in children.